Okay, in the previous video, we talked about a scenario that we call the simulation theory or the simulation hypothesis. It was a kind of a popular skeptical scenario to think about. But now what I want to do is turn to another scenario, what we call the brain in a vat skeptical scenario, because this is one that many contemporary philosophers have spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about. So I want to introduce it to us for us here now. So let's begin by recognizing that experience happens in the brain, right? So what we generally think of as phenomenally conscious experience, whatever that might be, it happens or at least is caused by whatever's going on inside your nervous system, the chemical reactions and synapses that are firing in your brain and so forth, right? So let's say that you stub your toe and you feel a certain amount of pain, or maybe you have a toothache and that's causing a kind of throbbing in your mouth. Well, these sort of experiences are the result of chemical reactions and synapses in your brain, right? So these experiences literally take place in your brain, inside your skull. Ditto for all the other phenomenally conscious experiences that you might have. Like if you are looking at a sunset and you see beautiful shades of red and purple and orange and so forth, all of those colors that you see are actually experiences in your brain. So, with that in mind, we can think of a hypothetical scenario where you are kidnapped by, let's say, some evil brain scientists. Some scientist who then removes your brain from your skull, right? Of course, this is a very hypothetical sort of sci-fi example, but let's ignore those, extreme elements of the thought experiment and just focus on the details of the experiment itself. Right. So this is only a thought experiment. We're not trying to say that this happens in the real world. Right. But in order for your brain to stay preserved, right, in order to keep your brain from dying, the scientist then puts your brain into some vat of nutrients, whatever that might be. And of course, this is why we call it the brain in a vat skeptical scenario. Right. So the scientist kidnaps you, removes your brain from your skull, puts your brain in a vat of nutrients, and then the scientist hooks your brain up to a supercomputer that causes you to have all of the different experiences that you normally would have in the daily go of things. Of course, these experiences would be false insofar as there is no external world that you're experiencing. Right. So let's suppose that the supercomputer causes you to experience a cup on a table, right? You're looking at a cup on your table. Well, it would seem just as real as any other experience that you might have in your daily go of things, except for it would be false because there is no cup, there is no table, and so even though it seems real, it would not be. It would be non-veridical in this case, a non-veridical experience. Same goes for if you stub your toe. The supercomputer causes you to experience the pain from stubbing your toe, but there is no toe, and there's nothing that you stubbed your toe on, and so that experience would be non-veridical. And ditto for the case where you're looking at a beautiful sunset. There are no colors out there. There is no sun that's setting, and so forth. It seems just as real as any other experience, but in this case, we're stipulating that since you're nothing more than a brain in a vat, then this particular experience is non-vertical. It's not a true experience, or it doesn't map onto anything out there in the external world, right? Of course, we would not know this. There would be no way for you to ever know that you're a brain in a vat. It would be sort of like living in the matrix, if you will. So you would never be in a situation where you can kind of look behind the curtains to find out that the scientist kidnapped you and put your brain in a vat. Why? Well, because whatever experience you have is just the result of what the supercomputer is putting into your experiential life, right? So maybe you could say to yourself, well, I know how to figure out that I'm just a brain in a vat, right? Or how I'm not a brain in a vat. Maybe if I go out in the world and find out that there are no supercomputers that could plausibly do this, then that would be a reason to be skeptical of whether or not I'm a brain in a vat. But the problem is that if you don't find any supercomputers that could do this, that's because the supercomputer is causing you to have an experience where there are no supercomputers. Likewise, if you go out looking for a scientist who could plausibly perform such a feat as putting your brain into a vat of nutrients and hooking it up to a supercomputer, well, it turns out that it's just the supercomputer that's causing you to have that experience in the first place. And so no matter what kind of evidence we could plausibly ever use to show that you're not actually a brain in a vat, it turns out that won't work because it would just be the supercomputer that's causing you to have that experience in the first place. Nothing more than what we might say happens in the Matrix, right? And so this is an interesting sort of skeptical scenario because it looks like there's no way to show that you're not in this scenario, right? All of your experiences are just as real as any normal experience would be, but these are false experiences. Your false experiences seem real, they seem true and veridical, but they're not. Right, so we can ask, is there any way you can know with certainty that you're not currently a brain in a vat? And it looks like the answer will be no, you can't. And the reason why this is a helpful way to think about a skeptical scenario is because it introduces what we call the skeptic's challenge. Now, we can put the skeptic's challenge in the following sort of way. It can be understood as a challenge to show that we are not currently in some sort of a skeptical scenario like the Matrix or this example of a brain in a vat, right? Now, that's just kind of a general way of putting the challenge, but we can also put the challenge into argument form. And this is what I have here for you, right? So the argument would say, premise one, I do not know with certainty that I'm not in a skeptical scenario, like being a brain in a vat. Premise two, well, if I don't know with certainty that I'm not in a skeptical scenario, then I cannot know with certainty anything about the external world. Therefore, I cannot know with certainty anything about the external world. Right, so that's the skeptic's challenge put into argument form. And it looks like in order to reject this argument, I need to be able to show that I can know with certainty that I'm not in a skeptical scenario. Short of showing this much, then it looks like I cannot know with certainty anything about the external world. So how would you respond to this argument? Is there a good way to respond? These are some of the things that we're going to need to consider.